Hey y'all, it's Moonlight Cowboy, and today I have another tutorial for you. This one is going to be in Burning Springs, and it is going to be the bridge that is the northern part of the map. It's north of Athens, it's west of the tunnel that I built at previously, but if you just follow the train tracks up there, you can't miss it. It's pretty easy to find. It literally follows the roadways up there, so if you just take the northernmost route, you will run dead into it. This was a really cool build. I really like how this came out, especially with some of the lighting features and such, but also the layout is pretty unique. So I'm going to show you how I did it. It's not super hard, but it has its trickiness. So first, I want to kind of give a preface here as I'm getting my first foundation placed. I made this purposely off center. Now you're probably going to say, especially those of you who've been watching my tutorials, you're going to say, oh my goodness, Moonlight Cowboy, off center, why? So you will see later on in the video, on top of these bridges, you have that little gap between the bridge and that that stone pillar that holds them up, right? Stone wall, what have you. And I wanted to really utilize one of those as like a shelf. And the only way I would have had room to do that is if I'd made it off center. Otherwise, it's on center in terms of the going the other way. So once I got my foundations down, I'm going to go ahead and do my underpinnings. Go ahead, go under the map to do that. You know, as I'm doing this, you know, I still think back fondly on all those times where people were like, oh, well, now I'm not going to need to know how to do tricks anymore because I can do anything you can do. And that's great, but you can only do those if you've watched either my tutorials or other people's tutorials, because in order to put underpinnings, you still have to go underground. In fact, we will be going underground quite frequently for this build, but as you see, I'm just going to go ahead and throw those underpinnings on those foundations like so. Pretty easy stuff, nothing here mind-blowing yet. I don't think anything in this build's super mind-blowing, but I think there's some really cool aspects, some things that I hadn't done before with this build, which I think came out pretty cool. So I'm creating a little platform, and I'm just going to go to the other side over here and do the same thing with the underpinnings from underground. And I already have my catwalks in place, so I'm just going to add my walls. And that's pretty easy stuff. You don't necessarily have to have catwalks to do this anymore. This is more of a force of habit type thing. There were other ways I could have done that. I could have added walls above there by adding another set of foundations and then just making sure the walls were flipped and adding them that way. But the catwalks were just a step saver for me. But you can now add underpinnings without having the catwalks per se. Alright, so the next thing I'm doing here, if you notice, I'm offsetting these walls. I want a little bit of lip on the other side, on both sides, right? To kind of break up the monotony. I don't want it to just be a flat surface on both sides of the bridge. I just wanted a little bit of texture. So to do that, I'm going about 1/4 inch off of the lip of that foundation there. And then I'm just going to go ahead and add my walls using catwalks. Now, there are ways to do this without catwalks as well. It is more tedious, so for just ease of use, I do recommend using the catwalks. But you could have free placed these walls. You could have used there's a trick you can use. Lucy Jane has a tutorial on it for the spacing with the what are the stair posts? That's what they are. Oh, I'm not with it today. Okay, so we're still getting our walls into place, and where that step is over there, you'll see I kind of identify that as as where my doorway is going to be, basically where I'm walking in and out of right there. This bridge build will only have the one doorway. That way I can maximize the inside space. In other bridge builds where I've had like a doorway on each side, it's usually on the bigger builds. So then I have, I have room to do that kind of stuff here. This is a nice bridge because it's not super big if you just build under this middle part. So you still have it's not like where you have to stretch out your decor too much, but at the same time it's big enough to where you can make the rooms a little bigger. You've probably seen a lot of my builds recently where they've been on the smaller side, and that's to maximize budget, but I wanted to do something more on, like, I guess the happy medium side of this. So here I'm adding my doorway over here just by using the edge of that foundation and or the underpinning there, and snapping it to using a catwalk and going a 1/4 inch the other way. When I go the other way like that, it's flipping the wall so that way it's wallpaper side out. Pretty easy. And now, like, the basis of what I'm going to be doing is set up. So now I can kind of wall some of that in. And I'm going to use the half walls, and that's only because I want to be able to use those half wall windows specifically. They're a nice, clean, square look. They're one of my favorite walls for windows because the windows aren't all busted up inside of them. And they come in 2 flavors. You could use the white, or if you don't have, or I'm sorry, the blue. If you don't have the blue set, there is a red set. That also works just fine. And because we're going to be doing them where it's wallpaper side out on both sides, it doesn't really matter. Really, it's dealer's choice. Of course, you could use whatever wall set you want. This is more just to show you how I did this structurally. Now, this is important here. If you notice what I'm doing here is I'm adding these roofs over here. And you're like, why are you adding roofs right here? Well, I tried with floors for so long to get these walls in up here. Floors won't go through. It's constantly saying item not visible or intersecting, and it wouldn't let me do it. So roofs were the trick to getting these walls up into the tight space up there. So what I did was I just basically attached those roofs to the side walls over there, and then I flexed them in a way that positioned them to where I could snap a wall to the top of those roofs. And you'll see that a few times here because I'm going to do this a lot to get these into position, because I also want to double wall those too. So as you see, I'm getting that flexed in there, and then I'm making sure that I can do both sides, which I check that. That's what I was doing at first. And now I want to get my next one in. So for this other one, I can just go off the middle foundation, because with the middle foundation here, that's the dead center, right? For the other ones, I had to do a little finagling, so I didn't talk about it much that first time because I knew I was going to do it again. Notice I put a corner roof over there, right? And then I put another corner roof, like so. And then what I can do with this corner roof is I can attach it and I can rotate it like so to get it the position I want. And then I can just flex that up. And now at least it's going the right way. It just needs to be changed a little bit here. So I'm going to flatten this. And then I'm just going to flatten that one and rotate it 180 degrees. So that way the angle side is like going up on that wall. Like so. And then I can add my next wall. So this is the side, as you're noticing, and I'll point this out later. That's the side where I'm taking away from some of the wall space up there because I'm not going to use that nook. In fact, I'm going to roof that in by free placing roofs later. But at least I want to get my walls in there. So once they're in there, I'm going to break that first set of walls up there, like so. If I can use my bow correctly today. I did this with HUD off. Sometimes it makes some of the things I do in tutorials a little easier to demonstrate, but on the flip side, it gets rid of like my aim. So it's a little annoying. But anyways, what I did was I had the roofs on the other side, as you see, snapped, right? I'm going to do it again, so that way you can I can show you here. And I will add a roof to this wall here. And then what I'm going to do is I would snap another roof on the other side. And this is to double wall it, right? So we already had the wall there, which I'm going to destroy. And then I'm going to go ahead and flatten one of these roofs right here in a second. Actually, I don't even think I had to, because with the other roof up, I was able to just snap it into place because that other wall was in place. But yeah, so I basically you have the two roofs on both sides, both of which have a snapping point, and from there all you have to do is snap them onto the tops of those roofs. Now to do the other side, since I already have these walls in place, it's going to be really simple. I'm just going to kind of do like an accordion with these roofs across the way like so. I'm going to remove those because I don't need those middle ones. I'm going to do it for all of the walls, and then I can just replicate the process on the other side without having to do some weird angling on some corner roofs. Like so. Sometimes they're a little tricky to get in because they're finding multiple snapping points. So you just got to be a little patient and kind of edge it in gingerly. And then we're doing that last one there. And then once we get that into position, there we go. We'll be able to add our walls the exact same way. Should snap right in there. And height plays a factor in this too. So I use that one rock, which you will see here in a minute, as like my gauge on how the height of this build was going to be. If I'd have gone too high, the walls could have poked out at the top of the bridge. Too low, wouldn't have gotten the coverage I needed, and it might have been harder to snap it in there in the first place. This was a really good sweet spot. But I'm doing the same thing on this side. So as you see, I have those roofs. I have attached them to the other side through the bridge wall, and then I'm just going to go ahead and add those walls, and we are good there. So now I have walls, they're double walled up top. Now I want to double wall these walls. So what I did was I added upper floors instead of catwalks because I knew they'd be a little easier, and I'm going to go ahead and break these walls. So if you see, I have these floors, and because of those, they have a strong snapping point, and I'm able to snap them in. Now, this one corner here on both sides is actually a little bit tricky because it won't let you put an upper floor into place. This would be a place where I would highly recommend using a catwalk, which you see me do. You can also free place the wall, but again, you look at that slight imperfection there when you do that potential, unless you've got a real steady hand. So I was able to add double walls on the ground over there, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side here. And I'm going to start with the catwalk on this one. So basically I use an angled catwalk, or like a 90-degree bend catwalk, medium-sized catwalk, and then another one of those in order to get that to work. And now I have my double wall in there, and I can start peppering in walls as I see fit. I'm just making sure they're all going the right way. That way I know at least one side is done completely and correctly. And I'll do the same thing on the other side here. So there we go. And I'm using those same upper floors to kind of get that effect from the other side there, because just because I was lazy, basically. I could have just used those walls. Now to get this door in, I'm going to show you two ways you can do to do a double wall on a doorway. This is the first way. This is the one most people know. And I just move my foundations around to where they snap to that doorway, and then I can move those foundations back, right? That one's really easy to do. There is another way, which I will show you later, when you don't feel like moving the foundations. It's the same thought process. You're still snapping, but it's just through a door instead of a foundation. And I'm just getting my mostly my last walls into place here. There we go. And then I'll repair all, and what I like to do at this point is I'll usually wallpaper everything. just to make sure that I got everything and I'm not missing something, like a wall or something is out of sorts. Plus, then I can kind of get an idea what I'm going to be doing. Now we want to make our rooms, and this is where things get a little tricky. So if you notice my build, we did it on a quarter edge off, a quarter catwalk off of the edge of each foundation. So that means my build is only 2.5 foundations wide on the inside. So in order to make the rooms the way I want to, I'm going to use some catwalk magic here. And as you can see, I'm using the catwalks to kind of position where I want these walls to come in. See, so these walls are going to overlap a little bit. And so I'm just kind of creating what that space is going to look like. So that back there is going to be my bathroom. And then I can do this here to give me a little bit more bedroom space. And then that back area over there can be a bed nook in that back right corner. One thing too, and I'll point this out while I'm doing this next part, is that with these walls, when you get the overlap on them, you get some flickering, but if they're double walled and you have wallpaper, you can change them to a slightly thicker wall, like the Helvetia wall, and it'll get rid of that flickering on your wallpaper, just as a quick heads up. So play with your walls. If you find that your walls are flickering when you have wallpaper on them, and some of your walls are slightly, like by 1 pixel thicker than some others, depending on how many walls you have. So as you see, I'm just kind of now that I got the layout there, I'm just kind of following that same pathway of getting the walls into place. Now this is another way you can get a doorway in. I got my half walls up there, and then I just got 3 up, and I removed the bottom 2. And then I can add a doorway that way, which is another way. So actually I do have 3 ways you can add a doorway if need be. So they'll snap to that upper wall, and then I've got my doorway there. Now here's the other way you can double wall. This is pretty cool. So I'm using this doorway, and actually I have to credit Alex P. He's the one who showed me this many moons ago. And the door becomes the snapping point. And you just have to break the other wall, and then I'm going to just, while I'm here, break that one so I can double wall the upper part up there as well. And then once that's done, I can just get rid of that door, and I don't have to worry about moving around a whole bunch of foundations because I got my snapping point into place. Similarly, I'm just breaking more walls to get my double wall effect inside or outside, depending. I just want everything inside the camp and outside the camp. This whole thing's got to be double walled. You don't have to do this if you don't plan on doing double wall, but I wanted that flexibility with this build. Some builds I just single wall, if it fits what I'm trying to do. So here's another one where I need to put a doorway in, so I'm just going to snap that puppy right in there, and I'm going to add my door. Basically what you saw before. Notice I can't snap that door or that wall to that door because this wall isn't broken. Not all walls are like that. There are some that will let you do that. I just didn't want to have to go through the process of sorting my doors, finding the other one so I could change it back into the other style of door. So I just went ahead and broke that. I thought it to be a time saver. And then on this side, I'm just going to go ahead and add those other half walls, so that way that's all done and I don't have to worry about that. And then we've got a few more we've got to add, and then most of the inside structurally will be done. And then I'll show you a couple other neat tricks too along the way that to kind of give you an idea what I'm trying to accomplish here. One thing we're going to be doing here shortly too is even though I double walled those inside, I made a decision towards the middle end of this build that I wanted to just eliminate having that wall show up on top. So I end up roofing in the bathroom and the bedroom and then leaving the rest exposed. And what that did for me was it created a sense of different levels of heights. It wasn't all the same. So each room had like the rooms had a different feel when you walked in than the living room. It made the living room feel much more grand. Now in this scenario, I'm just putting my foundations back now that I feel like I have almost everything double walled. And then we can go ahead and repair everything, which we had. And then I found that there were 2 walls that were missing, so I just went ahead and added these last ones here. And then we will be done with that, most of the structure on the inside. Again, using catwalks, this is pretty easy. There are bypasses, but I do recommend even now having the catwalks. So yeah, if you notice, see how that side has a no lip on it? And then in a minute, we're going to see the other side, how it does have a lip on it. See up there how it has that lip? I created that on purpose, and this side has no lip. And that's because I'm going to use the other side as a shelf. And from the outside and from the inside, nobody's going to know because I'm free placing these roofs in here like so. This was a little tedious, but in all honesty, I only had to do it with 4 roofs because I only have 2 rooms that are basically 2 by 1 squared. So I got those in a position, and there was some overlap, so that way they weren't poking out the side. So that took a hot minute, but in all honesty, anybody can free place a roof. I just wanted to make sure it was going to be, it was going to only go up to the height of the brick and no further. Because really, I just want to cover up those walls up there and give it a different effect on the inside of like the height of the roof. So for the corners, this is something I do often with like the fence posts. But I decided because we have so much of that stonework, I was going to implement these as well, even though they're not the same. They're the same tone as like the pre-existing. So I used these and I merged them down, and then I was able to put those into the corners too. And they don't actually poke out through the other wall because they're double walled. So see, they're not poking out from that side. So that was a really good way to not have your corners show. Now this is cool. This is something I've never done before, but I had this idea because we have our different railings and fences that we can use, but I'm really bored with them, so I wanted to come up with something a little bit different. So notice I pulled that wall slightly off of the edge to where it's just a little bit off. And I'm pulling it out too because of my doorway. You'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. Right now it's like, what are you talking about? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use another wall as my railing here in a minute. So right here, I'm just going to catwalk off of this. I don't know that I could have used a upper floor. I think they were giving me problems. But I have my walls right here. And I'm making sure that they actually snap to the catwalks. And I'm just going to move the whole bundle of catwalks over and make sure that that's snapped correctly. See what I mean by the doorway? I wanted to make sure that the walls go all the way up to the doorway. Now I'm going to float them up a little bit. I'm going to make sure they're all perfectly the same height. Yep, they all look good. So now watch what I do. I'm going to take, and these are walls that I almost never use for any reason. I'm going to snap those up through. So I'm going to take something that would have probably been more for a jail or a raider type camp, and I'm turning them into clean railing. Ta-da! And I'm going to do that on the other side too. I really like the way that looks. I'm going to use that again in another build along the way. But for this side, I notice because there's no doorway here, I didn't need to move this over at all. So essentially, all I'm needing to do is do the catwalk thing. And I moved it just slightly off and offset it from the underpinning. But I didn't move it to the right or left or anything like that. And then I'm just going to, again, move these up a little bit. Like so. Make sure it's about the same as the other side. as long as they're all the same pixel on one side, if one is like one side's like 1 or 2 pixels higher than the other, nobody's going to notice. I like validated it by later checking it with like an item and seeing how they measured up to make sure it's perfect, but that's just because I'm OCD. You don't have to. You just want it to be the effect, like the height, desired height that you want on either side. It could be different on either side, or it could be identical on either side. Dealer's choice, right? So once I got those in, now I've got this really cool, like low profile railing on both sides, and then I can use that for planters, which is what I end up doing. Now, remember I talked a lot about that shelf and how I off-centered this camp, and this is why I did that. So, as you'll see here, we still use this camp module here, and I'm just going to fast forward through the process of raising this up. You would essentially just put this on top of a camp module with like a rug or something, and then what you can do is you can then free place the rug from underground, as long as it's low enough from the ground to where it's not going to snap up to the top. Which that was getting to the height. It wasn't high enough from what I wanted, and you'll see here in a second. I'm just going to go ahead and move that up a couple more clicks. The struggle is real. There we go. Move that up a little bit more. And then let's see where we land. So I'm using my camera mode to like keep me honest and make sure it's going in the right position, and I'm using character mode in build mode to make the adjustments. And one thing that I don't demonstrate here is that I didn't add the lighting to those like I should have. I should have merged the lighting into those planters, but for some reason I forgot until it was night, and I realized, oh my goodness, it's like not illuminated up there. So I ended up having to do the exact same thing with these rugs and with like a series of miniature holiday lampposts, and float those up so that way they would click through, because I was too lazy to pull everything down after making all the adjustments. I figured I had enough budget to waste 2 flamingos, which is very unlike me, but I really wanted to get through this build. I actually did this build, if you guys can believe it, in about 5.5 hours. So I was able to move through this fairly quickly. I would imagine for most people this would take like a day or two of, not all day, but like a day or two of casual playing to get a build like this knocked out. If you're walking into it with like some semblance of what to do, like if you know how to maneuver roofs really well and catwalks real well. But anyways, yeah, I'll probably come up on the height on that a little bit more. But essentially that's the effect I was going for with these, with that shelf up there. That's why I did this off center like that, so I'd get more real estate up there, and so the flowers wouldn't poke out on the other side, which they do not. And I'm very proud of that. But yeah, so we got our little bit more height, and I think that looks fabulous, especially with the illumination. I think that this camp came out really good. In fact, I think that turned out to be one of my best feature walls ever for like a pre-existing location. See, look how amazing that came out. It's really well illuminated. I'm really proud of the way that looks. I think the whole camp overall came out really well. Really interesting layout. It feels normal, but then you get into these little rooms like this nook here and stuff, and where the bed is at, and I think that just came out. It really pops. And I was able to do some really cool custom merges like that table down there, and then I used that counterfeit cap producer, and that's where I got that little computer over there on the side. And that's really the build. I hope some people give this location a try. Anyways, it is a new year. Thank you all so much for following me for the last nearly 7 years. I really appreciate it. You all stay safe, stay blessed, and have a blessed day.